Duke and Louisville will square off for the ACC championship on Saturday night. We were talking before we were recording, Riley, that Friday night felt like the ACC tournament was back. Vibes were back. You had two close games, two good games between four good teams. Well, three and a half good teams. The first half UNC wasn't necessarily that, but
That's fair.
it felt back, and I'm expecting the same kind of environment on Saturday night when these two teams square off. They met earlier this season on December 8th, long, long time ago. Duke won 76-65, but Louisville held a double digit lead, led by as many as 14 points in the first half of that game before Duke came back. Cooper Flagg played a big role in that. He is not going to play. Malik Brown also is not going to play. Duke is shorthanded. They were able to beat North Carolina, but if Louisville is going to take advantage of that and win, what do they have to do? What does that look like?
Ralph, what's our friend Jeff Goodman's favorite thing to say anytime it comes down to the keys to a game?
Um, different things that I don't know if I'm allowed to say on here.
I was going to say point guard play, point guard play. Goodman loves saying point guard play.
Point guard play.
I would extend it beyond just the point guards though, and just say guard play in general. I love the way that Louisville can match up with Duke's size on the perimeter, where you have Hepburn, Edwards, and Hadley as your starting one, two, three. I think they have the size to go toe to toe with Sion James, with Tyrese
Mhm.
Proctor, with Conkin Nipple. They're not going to have that same size advantage that they had over North Carolina, where they can just shoot over guys. And I think all three of those guys can, with Hepburn, Edwards, and Hadley, can fill it up in their own right as well. And I honestly think that the way those like 3-on-3 matchups fare will ultimately decide the game. Because when you look at the front court, like James Scott is pretty much like skinny Common Malawash. They do the same things. They're just in there to catch lobs and block shots, you know?
Yep,
Like, is he like keto Malawash? Is that what we should call James
we'll
Scott?
we'll go
Um,
with that. Hey, Malwaj isn't exactly a massive wide man.
that's true. I think Malawash is like pretty bulky though. Is
I
Scott
mean, he's 7'2", 250. Like he's solid,
Scott to
but
me? I mean,
he's not
Scott's good.
he's not chunky.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, but Scott to me, like he's a very, very good rim protector lob threat in his own right. I would just say like Malawash is the slightly elevated version of him.
Yes, that's
I think
fair.
Scott's good enough to neutralize him and Gonga as well, regardless of who's on the court. But yeah, I really think it's going to come down to how the guard matchup fares in this one. Particularly with like Tyrese Proctor. How does he rebound? We mentioned this on the Duke UNC recap. Proctor's 25% from three over his last six games. You compare that to someone like Terrence Edwards, who has just been on fire. I guess on fire.
He's playing very well.
He was one
He
for nine against Clemson, but aside from that, he's been
he's
on fire.
producing. He is producing at a high clip.
I got a little too excited talking about how well he's been playing, but I mean he's scored over 20 points in four of his last five games, so I think that still constitutes on fire.
Yes, I think so. I mean that's the key. Duke was not able to create off the bounce when they needed to. And that allowed North Carolina to make that comeback or turn that comeback from cutting a deficit from 20 to 12. It made it 20 all the way to 1. I
Hmm.
think it exasperated that. Um, Louisville's blown leads themselves in the tournament, so no lead is going to be safe. No lead is going to be safe in this game. But I do think Louisville has an athleticism advantage on the perimeter.
Hmm.
I just don't know if that's enough to make up for like Duke's interior size, particularly with Mgangba now playing a, like really well, really productive minutes too.
Hmm.
Like he has stepped in and filled Malik Brown's shoes. He's not the same defensive presence.
Right.
He's probably more of an offensive threat.
Hmm. Hmm. I still want to say, yeah, I guess that's a good point. I'm like, I know all of his six of his field goals against Duke, against UNC were dunks, but he does have a little like playmaking in his bag. Like you can run the offense through him a little bit at the top of the key, or at least have guys cutting around him that I think could give Scott some issues, like pulling him away from the basket.
Yeah.
It's also going to be an interesting matchup. I'm assuming Duke goes with, I'm guessing it's like Sion at the one. Proctor at the two, Khan at the three, Isaiah Evans at the four. That Isaiah
Mhm.
Evans and Noah Waterman matchup's kind of fascinating as well.
It will be.
Evans
And
was like really bad at doing what he does against North Carolina, as in scoring, but like pretty solid defensively. But
yeah.
that is kind of yeah. You don't I don't really know what to expect out of that one. What were you gonna say though?
No, I was gonna say, yeah, like um, to be honest, I don't know what to expect from any of these teams. We talked about it in the Louisville preview that the Clemson game was going to tell us a lot because Louisville had not played a quad one game since mid-January. Then you go play Clemson, who's a good team, but shorthanded,
Hmm.
right? And Duke is shorthanded as well, but shorthanded Duke is still a second weekend NCAA tournament team,
Right.
right? So we haven't seen Louisville play this level of competition in quite some time, probably since the last time they played Duke. Duke, I have questions about without Cooper Flag. If Louisville is really good, if
Hmm.
Louisville is legitimate, I think they kind of are. I like what I've seen from them all season, but the Clemson game was some validation. Um, the lack of playmaking is concerning to me about Duke.
Hmm. I agree as well. I think especially it gets more challenging when you factor in that it's probably Edwards who's guarding Khan, and Edwards has done really admirably on pretty much any perimeter guy he's guarded. And I like Chucky's ability to turn Proctor over if he's guarding him too, which maybe puts the onus on like Sion James and Isaiah Evans to step up and make big plays. Evans has like that psychotic ability to go nuclear and hit like five threes in a game. I mean, he
If he,
single-handedly swung the game against Georgia Tech, like
yeah,
could do something like that. He's just, I mean, it's insane. Like he shot 43% from three, 39.5% from three in conference play, and yet it still feels like he's just a wild card and you don't know what to expect.
it's the streakiness. It's the J.R. Smith element of things, right? Where he could go off and hit seven of them. He could go 0 for 7
Mhm.
and be a non-factor in the game, right? Um, who do you think's winning?
I'm gonna go with the Blue Devils. I think Duke usually wins the ACC tournament, and they're just gonna get it done again. The way I envision this like turning out as Louisville probably builds a double-digit lead and then chokes it, like con legacy type performance, even against Edwards. Proctor breaks out of his slump, hits three or four threes, um, and maybe even like an Isaiah Evans heat check moment where between those three, I think it's enough to will them to victory. And I do believe if Flag is out for an extended period of time, Duke may eventually run into trouble, but it's not coming for a couple more games. Like I still think they end up getting this done.
Ken Palm has Duke winning by 10. Do you think Duke hits 10 or is it
I don't
less
think
than
they
10?
win by 10. No, I think it's a one possession game, like every game Louisville's played in the ACC tournament, and like a lot of these ACC tournaments have come down to the wire in general. I think that trend continues, and Duke probably wins like 77 to 75. So that's like the score of every game, the best in the
It
ACC
feels
tournament.
like it. It feels like it. I'm gonna go Duke as well. I think Duke by about 7, but it's one of those things where it's a game of runs. Louisville may take a lead, and then Duke may push it back out to 14. Louisville
Mhm.
cuts it to 3. Duke pushes it out to 12. Where it's a little bit back and forth, but Duke is always somewhat in control. With how inconsistent both of these teams can be throughout the course of a game,
Right.
lends itself to a game of runs. I think Duke is though is able to keep the cards at arm's length for a majority of the game.
I'm with you on that.
Well, we'll see. It would be Louisville's first ever ACC championship. It would be Duke's bajillionth.
Check in with their SID for the actual number. Where the sleeper stats and research department, they're not working after hours tonight.
No, not after hours tonight, but it'll be good. It'll Duke. I'm sure we'll get a number up there when if and when Duke does. Um, real quick before we get out of here, the fact Louisville is playing in this game is absurd. Like not the fact that they've made it here, but just think about where this program has been, and just immediately, Pat Kelsey, you're playing for an ACC title,
Insane. Amazing what happens when you upgrade your coach.
massively.